Good evening and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada in the office of Alan Butel. He's a local attorney here in Las Vegas that lets us use part of his office for a broadcast booth, and I really appreciate that. Short commercial for him. Alan does criminal defense and civil litigation. He's pretty good on gun issues also. He's been a guest on the show several times talking about gun laws and such. So if you are considering an attorney you need for something, you might look into Alan Butel. He's in the book. This show is all about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues, predominantly self-defense issues. We are on YouTube. Put up a new show every Thursday evening at 5 o'clock. You probably know that if you're watching this. We are now rebroadcast on a new series of stations. It's the Nevada Talk Network. Their main station is 12:30 a.m. in radio out of Ely, Nevada. And they broadcast in Reno, Sparks, Carson City, Battle Mountain, Hawthorne, Armagosa Valley, and so forth, all throughout the state. But if you go to the KELY 12:30 a.m. and click on that, you will find their websites. And the show is rebroadcast on all those stations simultaneously, starting at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, despite the fact that I put out some advertising that said Sunday morning, which turned out to be wrong. Anyway, today's guest is my good friend and favorite ex-Fed, firearms instructor Lenny Davis. We're going to talk about some issues with a lot of things today on shootings and self-defense. Lenny, if you would, a bit of your background.
Sure. Thank you.
Listeners.
My name, as Bob said, my name's Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with Department of Homeland Security. Been a law enforcement and firearms and tactics instructor since 1980. Yeah, I know there's probably some people out there listening that weren't alive then. I've spent the last, I spent
most of them, yes.
Most of them, yeah. I spent 9 years after I retired from the DHS. I spent 9 years as a subject matter expert in terrorism for the U.S. State Department's anti-terrorism assistance program, where I got to go all over the world and train some really good friendly governments in anti-terrorism. And now I am the Director of Investigations and Training for Textratics International, a company here in Las Vegas.
That trains
counterterrorism, civilians, all sorts of stuff.
We couple of bookkeeping things I always like to do ahead of time. We are going to talk about self-defense cases and shootings, and some of the instances I use are good shootings, some are bad shootings. A few that are thrown in there once in a while are just dumb shootings. I generally leave the names out, but I do tell you the state it took place in, or the city. If you are involved in an actual shooting incident where you have shot somebody or somebody shooting at you, shot at you, or whatever, you need to get local counsel. We're going to give you advice that hopefully will keep you out of jail and keep you out of civil lawsuits, but the laws vary dramatically from state to state. So if you're involved in a case, you need a local attorney. If you call, my office phone there is on the wall. It's a recorder. I pick up the messages every day or so. If you call, I will be able to refer you probably to an attorney in the state you live in, because I've got bunches of them now that does firearms cases and so forth. Or if you have a question or comment while we're at it, you can send an email to that address and I will respond to that. If you want to get a hold of Lenny for some reason, or one of our other guests, you can simply send the email to that bob@firedupmail.com and I will forward it to the appropriate party. So that being said, we will look at, as we start down the list here, I want to talk about Texas for a minute and possibly what's going to happen in Florida. We are in the midst of federal national disasters, obviously. Starting with Texas, we have seen on the media, I can't imagine anybody's hearing this who doesn't know what's going on with the floods and the rain and so forth from the hurricane. They are reporting in Texas, media and bloggers, hundreds of robberies, home invasions, looting, sexual assaults, and thefts of jewelry from drowned victims by amputating their swollen fingers with bolt cutters and things. The media has shown a lot of homemade signs that say some variation of "you loot, we shoot." Want to make sure that you understand that the shooting of looters is sanctioned in some places. Texas is unique in it has laws or case law that says if someone steals your stuff, you may use deadly force to apprehend him. So actually, in most areas of Texas, you can shoot someone who is running from your home that had committed a crime in order to capture him or to recover whatever it is he has stolen. That is pretty much limited to Texas, the way the laws are written. If you don't live in Texas, don't try the "if you loot, we shoot." You can put up the sign, but actually doing it is another story.
I would be hesitant to put up a sign depending on where you're the jurisdiction. And of course, it's not just Texas and soon to be, well, and Louisiana, some in Florida and maybe some of the Southeast, but you know, we have tremendous wildland fires going on in California, you know, basically the entire Northwest and Western United States. I think there's something like 800,000 acres in Montana on fire.
Right.
So this could affect you no matter where you're at. But like Bob said, he asked me last week if I could try to get a hold of some of the guys that I know that are down there, and unfortunately they're working. You know, God love them. They're working probably 16-hour shifts, and it's just been crazy. And
nice hearing from you, Lenny. Click.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I had one of my friends call me back and said, "Look, man, it's crazy," and so I couldn't get a real firm idea of what's going on in the ground down there. It seems to be improving by the day. But I mean, it's still when you start thinking about it, you know, you had a police officer in the Houston area responding and drowned because his car got swept away. Yeah. So it's really a bad situation down there. There's a lot of people that are homeless. They've lost everything. You know, my hat's off to every sportsman with a bass boat that went out and saved people. Didn't ask, just showed up. There's been a great outpouring. With Hurricane Irma on the way in, I think it's going to be pretty ugly. I don't know what's going to go on in those states. I know I was telling Bob just before we went on air that I read an article where the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands has authorized law enforcement to seize weapons from anyone there in the Virgin Islands. So I don't know how that's all going to work out. The VI has a problem, and they got a lot of crime down there. It's a beautiful place. I've been there. They have a lot of crime, and some places are really dangerous. And now that you're going to have this Category 5 hurricane hit there, you know, and then it's going to be Puerto Rico, and then it's sort of a crapshoot of where it's going to go from there. So.
There are a whole lot of areas in the United States that are looking at having similar problems. I presume you know a guy named Joe who used to be number 2 at gaming control here in Las Vegas.
I do.
That individual lives in Florida. I want to give him a shout out. I sent him a text this morning, and he said they're further north. They're a bit out of the track, but they are just battering down their house and screwing things in, and they hope that it'll get through. Old friend of mine, and good guy. One of the guys who also knows from the era that he was involved in gaming control, probably where all the bodies are buried. So we will wish him all the best. Anyway, Joe, I thought I'd say hello on the show so you can tell your friends that I don't know what you can tell them.
Well, I spoke to a friend of mine in Orlando, Jose, who works for Department of Customs and Border Protection in their communications division, and they are prepping for a real nightmare down there. So Godspeed to everybody.
We may be assured, however, that with all the people with cell phones and whatever, when the thing calms down in all those areas and law enforcement has time to take a breath, those cell phone videos of people breaking into houses and stealing boats and whatever are all going to result in prosecutions. So it gives you the whole thing just drives me crazy when you see what happens with the absence of law enforcement. If law enforcement, there aren't enough of them or they can't respond because of 4 feet of water and this and that, it didn't take seconds for the bad guys to just run amok in these areas. I think maybe even some of the left is rethinking some of their beliefs. We need to get rid of all police departments. We're only an inch away from.
Well, I mean,
it's really scary.
As you know, I grew up in Northern California where the ground shakes at a moment's notice. I grew up in that kind of, well, it could happen here, and prepare and the best you can do. I mean, we're lucky we live here where, we do get flooding occasionally when there's, big thunderstorms like
today
that are moving in. But there's some flooding, but we're lucky we won't have 4 feet of water in our house, but we could have an earthquake here. So it's one of those things that folks, no matter where you are, if you're, you always should prepare for at least 3 days, have 3 days or a week's worth of preparedness ready to go.
Yeah. Have a couple of cases of bottled water, because the first thing you're going to do is run out of water. Food you can leave out and it doesn't spoil for at least a few days. Las Vegas is isolated. If they had a trucker strike, Las Vegas would be in real trouble very shortly. So anyway, it's always a good idea to be prepared and have your little storage thing in your house where you can stay, or you can get on the highway with the other 2.5 million people who are going to drive to Utah and steal from the Mormons up there.
Actually, they're only going to drive to the gorge, and then they're going to get, when there's a crash, that's as far as they're going to get.
Anyway, training, I want to address that. One of the things I always want to address on the show, we have lots of shootings we're going to look at, and training is so important that you practice with your gun, that you carry your gun in a manner that you can actually draw it when you want to, and so forth and so on. I'm working a case right now where there's a shooting involved, and one of the factors in it was the guy was carrying a gun in his pocket, and he seat belted in his car, and he couldn't get his gun out because he never tried that before. If that's where you keep your car gun in your pocket, you're going to discover you cannot get it out of your pocket while you're in the seat belt. So practice with an empty gun. My ex-employer, where I used to work, the gun store on East Tropicana, offers the concealed carry classes every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. You can sign up with them online. The renewal class, I think, is $55, and the all-day class for new people is $75. That includes everything, targets and ammo and everything. So it's a deal. Go over there and get some training. If not there, go somewhere else and get some training. But get some training. If you've got a gun in your house that you've never fired, learn how to shoot it. Important. KABC TV 7 and a website called On Scene TV reported on the 3rd of this month, a few days ago, Rancho Cucamonga, California. Just before 1 in the morning, Sheriff's Dispatch received a call from a resident of Rancho Cucamonga, and he's in the 11,600 block of Brindisi Way.
Brindisi.
You knew that because you used to live there, right?
No, I've been there though.
The homeowner reported he arrived home and found the front door of his house open. So as he got out of his car, he approached the door. There was apparently someone inside the house that fired at him. The homeowner then ran back to his vehicle, retrieved a firearm. Returning to his home, he engaged the suspect just inside the front door, actually fired his gun. He was inside the residence, about 2 giant steps, when he fired his gun. After hearing additional movement in the house, the homeowner retreated and called police. Deputies from Rancho Cucamonga Police Department, that must be a tough patch to put on your shoulder, Rancho Cucamonga, arrived and set up a perimeter. Believing the suspect may be barricaded inside the residence, they call the sheriff's department has a specialized enforcement division, a response team that responded. They made announcements on a loudspeaker for the suspect to come out, basically treated it as a barricade situation. Getting no response, they finally cleared the residence with a robot. They sent a robot in that looks room to room, and it didn't find anything. Apparently, the guy escaped out the back before the sheriff's response team got containment. After the residence was cleared, personnel from Rancho Cucamonga Department began investigating and processing the scene. They believe the homeowner interrupted a burglary in progress, according to Detective R. Whiteside. The incident terminated around 6 a.m. Detectives were still on the scene at 7:30. The suspect's identity is unknown and remains at large, and Rancho Cucamonga police are handling the investigation. This is a great case to talk about. First, glad the guy had a gun. Glad he was able to defeat the bad guys. The bad guy ran away, apparently. They are still looking for him. If you come home and you find your front door open, there's nobody else in the home. There was nobody else in the home. The guy knew there was nobody else in the home, apparently. If you come home and find your front door open, call the police and let them respond. They got, you know, I say this over and over, but they've got all the good stuff. They got lots of backup and body armor and robots and all sorts of things. If you can't by yourself look at the entire perimeter of your house, call one of your neighbors and ask him to keep an eye on your backyard from his house, not in your backyard with a shotgun in his hand, because the police are coming. Always let law enforcement do the search if that's possible.
I would like to address that.
The best way, again, I harp on this, the best way to win a gunfight is not to play. So that being said, all instances are different. I wasn't there. I'm not trying to second guess the homeowner. He can see more of what's going on and how far the house is from the neighbors and all this other details. But I'll have to stand on that. If you find your front door open, call the cops and stay put. Now,
well, let me address this, because it's kind of one of my pet peeves. I used to work for a training facility outside of Las Vegas, who shall remain nameless, who trained people in a scenario training to, you come home and you see your, it's almost identical to this. When you saw this, I went, did you just pull this out of there? They tell you this is the scenario. You come home, you see a guy come out the door with the TV set. He sees you, he drops the TV set, runs back inside, and you call the police, and the police say they're an hour or an hour and a half away. Then you hear a scream from your loved one inside, or somebody that you believe is your loved one inside, and now they with less than 30 minutes training, actual training, they wanted you to go in and clear that house. It is absolutely insane to do that. And let me explain. I teach a class for law enforcement officers, for narcotics detectives, not SWAT. I teach SWAT classes too. But for like narcotics detectives, those kind of investigators, I teach a class for building search and how to clear a house. It's a 40-hour class, folks. It takes 40 hours. We never, ever, one of the hard and fast rules is you never, ever, ever enter a building by yourself. Never. This guy, you know, again, I wasn't there, but I would not step into my house. I would have called the police. They got one of the best tactical teams in the United States, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Special Enforcement Bureau. Don't want to make those guys in Southern California mad. Great, great tactical team. I've worked with them and trained with them over the years. Phenomenal guys. They got there, the time they got called there, probably the law enforcement officers. But folks, if I can tell you anything, don't ever, ever, ever go in a house. Even if you know one of your loved ones is in there, do not go in that house. I've been trained for years to make entries on a house. I would never do that by myself because there's too much that can happen. And I think it was a ridiculous scenario. It's one of the reasons why I stopped training there a long time ago, because they were making it a fun scenario, but they were training bad tactics.
Yeah, you will. I'm sure everybody's aware since the Columbine shootings, all law enforcement in the United States, from the armed dog catchers to SWAT teams, got retrained in how to clear a building, and the first 3 officers on the scene make the entry if you've got an active shooter. You can hear gunshots and things like that. But they wait till there's 3 officers, because one guy going in by himself is simply going to get killed if there's an active shooter. If the police take 3, it'll take civilians way more than that. So stay safe. You getting killed isn't going to save your loved one. It's just going to make matters worse. Jerry Creed, an attorney local here in Las Vegas, does firearms trusts and Class 3 trusts. I mentioned that if you've got a gun trust, particularly a Class 3 trust, you need to get a hold of Jerry. Have him look at your trust. A lot of them were sold online and they are worthless. He's in Summerlin. You can reach him at 702-806-7777. His information is also on our website, I believe. If not, I'll make sure it is. I'm not sure it is there. Anyway, you can get a hold of Jerry and have him take a look at your trust, and he'll make sure it actually works. Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This was on the 1st of this month, 6 days ago. In DeKalb County, Georgia, responding officers were informed a 20-year-old and 1 or 2 other suspects attempted to rob 2 men. This incident took place at 1 in the morning in the parking lot of the East Perimeter Point Apartments on Snapfinger Woods Drive if you're from DeKalb County, Georgia. You know where that is. The robbery crew was armed. At least one had a gun drawn. One of the robbers, apparently the armed robber, snatched a gold necklace off the victim and took his iPhone. They approached him. Now, we're in the parking lot of an apartment building at 1 in the morning. The 20-year-old, according to police report, then the victim pulled his own gun after having his jewelry stolen and his cell phone. He pulled his own gun and fired. The 20-year-old would-be robber was pronounced dead at the scene. Lieutenant Lonzie Robertson told local media the shooter will not be charged because he was the victim of an armed robbery. It's still being classified as a justifiable homicide. There's not a lot of details here, but I wanted to put this in because there's a great training thing. They did research, and this was not a drug deal. We don't have any idea why this guy wearing all the jewelry was in the parking lot at 1 a.m. They left that out. But apparently it wasn't a drug deal gone bad, which is what everybody would assume. The police seem to have ruled that out. A guy is pointing a gun at you, robbing you, pulling your gun and firing before he realizes it can certainly be done. In the timing thing, the bad guy will not expect you to be drawing a gun. You have usually about 1 second before he realizes that you're drawing a gun. In that time, if you draw smoothly and you practice, you can draw your gun and fire 2 or 3 shots and hit him at close range, which it would be, of course, before he realizes he's got to fire back. If your rounds are aimed properly and you hit a vital spot, he will not fire back at you. He will simply fall over dead, as happened in this case. Pretty clearly, this is a good shoot. The other option, if you're in this situation, is there anything else you could do? Yeah, you could let him take your stuff and hope he decides not to kill you. There's no mention in this article of the robbers wearing a mask, making it likely the victim could identify them later. That makes you realize in your mind that most guys don't leave witnesses. If they were planning to leave a witness, they'd be wearing something over their face. The police said they don't intend to charge this victim shooter. The final decision, of course, will be up to the local district attorney. It looks to be a good shoot. We are under Georgia law, which is generally pretty favorable to self-defense issues. But what I want to point out here is firing your gun at somebody who's already pointing a gun at you is a really dangerous thing to do unless you are practiced. Otherwise, as you fumble to get your gun, he's going to kill you. If you haven't worked on a smooth draw and actually practice on a target that's 3 feet away or 2 feet away, which is where the bad guy's going to be, when you need to shoot, this is not a good idea, but it does work if you're a skilled shooter.
Yeah, and you have to do, I always really am a big proponent of dry practice, making sure your weapon is completely empty. You leave ammunition in another room, and practice, dry practice, and presenting your weapon from the holster. If you get it down and you properly do that, you can do that very easily, put a couple of 3 rounds on someone in 1 second or less. But you have to practice, you have to train. The other thing that jumped out at me at this story when I first looked at it was the fact that you got to be at 1 o'clock in the morning. You got to be situationally aware. Get out. You know, if there's people hanging around at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're not at a 7-Eleven, then you know what are these guys doing there? If they, you know, you need to have situational awareness, folks. When I pull into my house, every time I've ever pulled into my house, and it's dark, I make sure that there's lights on, and I look at everything, and I make sure that there's nobody that can just gonna walk right up to me. I've seen a couple of one of the favorite places for mafia hitmen is to catch you in your garage when the garage door is up. Why? Because you start getting out of the car, and before the door goes down, the guy walks in and walks up and shoots you. So be very, very careful. I have Harleys that reside in my garage, so my cars don't reside in the garage. But you know, when I pull in, I make sure that, you know, if I was going to go in the garage, that the door would be down before I ever opened the door and got out. So just be situationally aware, folks. I mean, we've talked about it before, your situational awareness. You know, you see people all day long walking down the street talking on a cell phone, and they're looking at the light, but they're not looking at traffic or anything around them. And the next thing you know, you step off the curb, a guy runs the light, and you get killed. That's situational awareness.
Yeah, this is a good shoot. And as I explained in the beginning, most of us would look at this and say it's, you know, the OBO gone wrong or whatever, but the police department investigating had eliminated that. They didn't give us the reason why the guy was standing in a parking lot with his gold necklace on at 1 in the morning, but it was not a drug deal.
Yeah, when I read it, I got the impression that the guy had just gotten home or something, was going to his apartment. So
you want to do that, but it's fine. It didn't say.
Yeah.
You know? And but I get 2 references on that, and they both said the same thing. I want to. Number 4 is going to take a while, and we've actually got a while. So let's do this. This is a case I'm probably going to use again next week when I have an attorney on with me also. But it's this is an interesting case, and the legal aspects are probably more interesting, which I'll probably do next week. But this is the McLeansboro Times Leader, reported on the 1st of this month, a week ago. Missouri jury acquitted a defendant who shot and killed a man from his front porch in September 2015, claimed self-defense under the state's standard ground law. The 41-year-old defendant was found not guilty of either second-degree murder or armed criminal action in a Pineville, Missouri shooting death of his resident girlfriend's 36-year-old ex-husband. A prosecutor, his name is Bill Dobbs, indicated he filed the murder charges primarily because when the sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene of the shooting, they found the deceased in the driver's seat of his truck with his seatbelt on and the truck in reverse gear with the engine running and both feet on the brake pedal. The truck was in the driveway of the home, pointed at the home at this time, about 50 feet away from the house. The defendant had moved in there, recently moved in there with his ex-wife and his two sons, disputed this account, saying the deceased drove toward the house from the head of the driveway at a high rate of speed before he stopped short and yelled that he wanted to speak to his ex-wife. The defendant then asked the ex-husband, who's in the truck, to leave. The defendant testified the ex-husband had threatened him in his life, both in person and in phone calls to the ex-wife. She had an application for a protection order that was pending. She had filed it, but it hadn't been served on the guy who was in the truck. So if it hadn't been served on him, he's not restricted by it, of course. The defendant now, when the guy drove into the driveway with this aggressive motion of the truck, according to him, armed himself with an AK-47, presumably a semi-automatic version thereof, and stepped out on the porch. The defendant fired five times as the ex-husband sat in the driver's seat of his pickup truck about 50 feet away. He testified he thought the ex was reaching for a gun. Jurors were given the option of involuntary manslaughter if they felt what the shooter did fell short of second-degree murder, but still warranted punishment. Instead, the jurors cleared him of any offense. The defendant's attorney, a guy named Ted Luby, he'd be a good guy to hire if you live in Missouri, said the jurors followed the law. He argued at trial that his client's decision to shoot was lawful because the ex-husband was trespassing, had made prior threats to kill the defendant and his ex-wife and himself, and was acting that day in a violent and tumultuous manner. After the trial, the defendant hugged his two sons in the court following the verdict. The 41-year-old and his family were clearly drained at the end of a 4-day trial, I'll bet, as well as two years spent under the cloud of a murder charge. The jury felt the overall actions of the deceased, the ex-husband, and the reasonable belief that he often carried a firearm, which was brought up in the trial, allowed a defense based on a stand your ground claim to be a reasonable defense. In essence, here the jury would not convict him of the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter or threatening somebody with a firearm. They let him simply walk away. This is a really close case. We don't have any witnesses really other than witnesses to the periphery events that she filed a protective order and so forth. It doesn't mention whether the father, whether his two sons, young sons, were in the house at the time this took place. This is why God made defense lawyers. This guy, this is when we look at this guy and say the guy clearly deserved to be shot, but boy, this is a tough case. God bless juries, and this is why God made defense lawyers.
Yeah, I read this thing and
You're looking at going.
yeah, I was like, here in Nevada, of course, again, as we've said earlier, this was in Missouri, or as my relatives call it, Missouri. In Nevada, this would not fly. Unless he rammed the vehicle into the house and then tried to make entry, I think this would have been a stronger case had he exited the vehicle and came towards the house. But again, here's the thing that I see in this, which would have probably got him here in Nevada, was he stepped out of the house. He was inside the house and he stepped out onto the porch. In Nevada, this guy would have to have tried to breach the house before you could use deadly force.
I mean, you're looking at this and going, this is a good shoot, and then you realize the guy was 50 feet away.
Yeah, I mean, unless he was shooting at you from 50 feet away, which the guy didn't have a gun. Yes, he thought he made the furtive movement. He thought he had a gun. Again, like you said, if I was involved in a shooting in Missouri, I would get a hold of Ted Luby because he seems to be a damn good attorney. This was close. This is about as close of one I've seen lately.
This is about as close as I've seen of one that would be classified as jury nullification.
Yeah, this was tough, folks. I don't know how this guy's still walking around. He would not have been in this state. Something like California, oh my God, he would be under the prison.
And of course, the prosecutor, under the law, the prosecutor is not in a position to appeal this unless there was an error in the trial. The jury's word when a jury finds you not guilty, you're not guilty, unless startling evidence that was not available, comes to mind. And even then, appellate courts are really unlikely to overturn juries who listen to all the testimony and weighed it. And the jury is the jury, and it's boy, this is a tough case. I'm going to run this by Clark next week because it's got a. Maybe I'm missing some here. Grant Defense, one of our sponsors, they are at Russell and Decatur, 5580 South Decatur Boulevard. It's right next to the Dewey Animal Shelter. They make a line of custom AR-15 rifles. They actually build here in Las Vegas, build the receivers and so on, and some amazing Glock custom pistols. I'm going to try, I haven't asked Grant yet, to get him down to one of my gun show tables on the next Cashman Field show to show off his pistols to people in real life. I'm just so impressed with his Glocks. It's like nuts. Grant Defense, go look. Their back door is the front door of the Dewey Animal Shelter. Can't miss it. The Chronicle Telegram, this is in Elwea, Ohio. Okay, you let me go with that one. Elwea. On the 5th of this month, a couple days ago, mother of three pointed her pistol at a would-be intruder and chased him out of the house after he broke in just before 8 p.m. on Monday, according to police. I like this story. According to police report, the local 33-year-old walked into the mother's living room on 4th Street and approached her 15-year-old daughter. She didn't have the door locked. The daughter's 17-year-old sister saw the intruder and screamed, launching the mother into action. Mom grabbed a pistol by her bed. She charged at the intruder, but dropped her gun while she was charging at him. But she and the 17-year-old then chased the 33-year-old out of the house, down the sidewalk until they lost sight of it. Officers were dispatched to the area and reported a burglary suspect fleeing the area, and the mother provided a description. Police found him, and he was arrested and charged with burglary. During the ride to the police station, the suspect let out an excited utterance. That's a legal term, which I meant, that he did in fact burglarize the house. In law enforcement, when you have somebody in custody and you haven't Mirandized them, they're simply a person of interest, and they suddenly start telling you they committed the crime, they can do that. And it's admissible in court as, the defense attorney would say, well, you didn't give them his Miranda rights. You don't have to unless you're asking him questions. He just decides to tell you that he assassinated Fidel Castro 20 years ago. You can write it down and say, yeah, the guy told me this, and it's presumed to be the truth. Anyway, he said that he did burglarize the house. The mother said the perp had entered the home once before, but left when she confronted him, so she didn't call the police. This time he approached her daughter, so the mom decided to take some action. She said, you picked the wrong, we'll leave a word out here, mother. She and her 17-year-old daughter chased the guy out of the house and down the sidewalk until they lost sight of him by St. Mary's Church. If you're in El Rey, Ohio, you know where that is. The mother's boyfriend had encouraged her to have the pistol ready. She said, "I'm thanking God it was a fluke. He told me to put the gun up there by me. The intruder was walking in like he didn't care. This time he was not stopping." Couple things. Hell hath no fury like a mama bear protecting her cubs. The intruder obviously didn't know that the pursuing mother had dropped her gun in the house while they were struggling. But that being what I said, consider for a moment what would have happened here. We have the third daughter was not home. We have the mom, the 17-year-old, and a 15-year-old daughter. And this guy walks in the front door and starts to grab the 17-year-old daughter. What would the outcome have been of this if this woman did not have a gun in her house? I presume she and the 17-year-old could probably whip this guy anyway, because she seems pretty tough. With crime rates the way they are wherever you want to go, a firearm is truly a tool you have to have in your home. You have to practice with it. Again, this is another practice lecture, which I'll avoid at the moment. I ran, which is great, and he got himself in jail, which is even greater. But this just struck me as, oh my God, if she hadn't had a gun, where would she be?
Well, and the thing is, she got very lucky. And Bob may not want to go to the training lecture, but I will, because I'm in that business. Folks, if you're going to use a handgun or any kind of firearm to protect yourself, learn how to use it. Learn how to use it under stress. She dropped the weapon. What if this would have fallen in the front of the guy's feet? It could have changed the entire dynamic of this thing. What if he'd have been armed and she dropped her gun? They were very lucky on this. And I don't like to second guess. We try not to second guess people on this show, but I'm sorry. This is a situation where, God loved mom. She went after this guy and saved her daughters, but she got lucky this time. She needs to go training.
I expect she probably will now.
I hope so.
I mean, how many crime scenes have we been at where somebody got murdered, robbed, raped, beat up, and so forth, and they had no means to defend themselves at all? And if you don't like guns, you don't like guns. Have one. Get some training with it. It's a tool you need to stay alive. Most of the anti-gun people, when you talk to them, truthfully, they have a gun in their house, and they're anti-gun because they don't think everybody else should have a gun. They have virtually every one of them I've met. When you go right down to it, and I've talked to a couple of them on the air on talk shows, and said, "Do you have a gun in your house?" on a commercial, and the guy looked at me several times and said, "You ask me that question on the air, I'll walk out of here." Yeah. The anti-gun people just think you shouldn't have a gun. The only one smart enough to have a gun is them. I would like to encourage you to order a copy of my book, The Reality of Armed Self-Defense. I sell them at the gun shows. I'll be at most of the gun shows over the next couple of weeks or 3 weeks. When we get to the end anyway, I'll tell you where they are. They're $10 at the gun shows. If you want to send me I'll take the $10 for the on-air sales too. Bob Irwin, P.O. Box 97413, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89113. It isn't on the wall here anywhere, but it's on the website, I think. Not sure. I'll check. This next story was, it's not self-defense, it's a safety recall. And I read this thing and I was just hysterically laughing anyway, the safety recall, it's a product safety warning and severe duty upgrade notice was issued Friday by Canuck's line of 9mm by 19 pistols, according to their distributor, Century Arms. The notice applies to Canucks, and there's a whole list of numbers. They all start TP9 S or TP9 SA. There's a whole bunch. They're different configurations of the same thing, which have demonstrated that repeated abusive dropping may result in damage to the safety features and an unintentional discharge. No other products, this was put up by Century Arms, no other products by Century Arms are the subject of this safety bulletin. Now, similar, a Sig Sauer suffered a public backlash after their this is me writing now, after their P230 unintentionally discharged during drop testing conducted by Omaha Outdoors. Unlike them, Canuck is stopping just short of a recall, instead offering a voluntary upgrade to combat the problem. The upgrade will revamp the trigger safety spring and firing pin block spring to increase the safety of the aforementioned pistols. The company says all pistols currently comply with and exceed current industry and military abusive handling standards. You ever seen an abusive handling? Don't answer that. Repeatedly dropping these 9mm, however, damages and disables and disforms internal components. Canuck suggests the handgun that suffers a significant impact should be inspected by a gunsmith before continued use. They are saying here, repeated dropping damages, disables, or deforms internal parts. So there's really no reason to start a recall?
I read that.
Can I yell bullshit on the air at the top of my lungs?
Well, it's a YouTube channel, so yes, you can. I looked at this and I went, oh, those are really one of those guns I really want to carry. I'm not bashing anybody that has one. I know there are some big fans of the Kanzig pistols. I did speak to a friend of mine back east last week, who's a firearms, he is the head firearms officer for a very, very large department back east that uses SIG pistols, and they were in the process of going over to the 320 when they drop unintentional discharge of dropping, they failed the drop test. And what SIG has come back to them and saying is, SIG engineered this pistol. For those of you that may not know, that SIG P320 is now going to be the United States Army. I think it's called the M17, the United States military's replacement for the M9 Beretta pistol. They built it like a tank. One of the problems is the trigger mechanism was built so heavily, when it hits, it has enough inertia that it can cause a discharge
from its own weight.
From its own weight. So SIG is going through, and they're doing voluntary. You know, if you own a SIG P320, get on the SIG website. They will fix this free of charge and send out new, or send your gun back with new parts. And it's a lighter trigger system. I asked him if that was going to cause him any, his department any real heartburn with getting 320s, and he said that management wants a couple of the newer 320s to do some drop testing with.
Right.
And so, and knowing SIG, they're a fine company. They've got really good customer service, especially when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar contract over God only knows how many years with the P320. They will fix this quite quickly, and it'll get out there. I have not yet actually shot one of these pistols, but I understand they're very, very good.
I have heard nothing bad about them also, and I'm obviously SIG is reacting to this. Other than saying this thing just drove me.
Well, and you were talking about the drop test, the abusive. That's one of the tests that the military does, and they beat the hell out of it.
Drop it on hard surfaces and this and the other thing. Anyway, hopefully this Century Arms they're a good company, and they need to do something different. It's just I didn't like the copy of their voluntary upgrade.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't do anything wrong. Quit dropping the pistol, and it won't happen.
Right. As you've known me for many, many years, you know I'm a big fan of the Steyr AUG that we were issued with U.S. Customs. And I was selected as one of the first 30 test firearms instructors in Customs to test the new AUG for 2 years before they made it the issued weapon. And we asked it was done in Arizona, and the guys from the National Firearms Program staff came out, and the guy from Steyr, Irwin, who is still their worldwide law enforcement military rep, and we asked him, well, how about the damage? What kind of torture tests do they do it? Irwin takes a Steyr AUG with a 30-round magazine and throws it across the range, paved part of the range. This thing bounces on it, and then he has one of the guys from Customs drive his 3/4-ton Suburban over it, and Irwin picks it up. Now, this thing is beat to hell, but Irwin picks it up and fires 30 rounds on full auto with it. After that, I was pretty much served. So they can take some abuse, and they're made to do that. So I see, Canik has probably got some problems, because if you're dropping that gun and damaging parts on the inside, it doesn't sound good.
No. Gun shows upcoming. We've got Western Trails Gun and Knife Show September 9 and 10 at Santa Fe Station. That's on North Rancho Drive at the casino there. That's this upcoming weekend. I will try and get there if I can, to be at the NRA table for at least part of Saturday. The Great Las Vegas Gun Show, September 23 and 24. That's Cashman Field downtown. We will be there. I've got an adjoining table again with Don Green, one of my resident lawyers. That's at Washington, Las Vegas Boulevard. Y'all know where Cashman is. The rumors that Cashman was shutting down completely are not true. They're going to still continue to have gun shows until the end of the year. So the shows are still going there. This is the Great Las Vegas Gun Show, as opposed to the Las Vegas Gun Show, which is the one that's held at Cashman. There is one coming up at Cashman also the end of next month, I believe. I didn't put it in the outline. Crossroads of the West Gun Show will be at Cashman again, October 1 and 22. So we've got September, the Great Las Vegas Gun Show. We got Crossroads at October 21 and 22. I do have still a number of passes for the Crossroads show. I may have some coming in the mail for the Great Las Vegas Gun Show. Hopefully, they're supposed to be on the way. If you would like a pass for the show, being as can't leave them at the gun store anymore, which made sense, but I'm not there anymore. If you will drop me an email at that address, I will mail you one. So, or leave a request on the answering machine with your address, so I can mail it to you, and I will do that so you have it in time for the show. We are on YouTube, as you know, and are watching Fired Up with Bob Irwin. This is on Thursdays from 5 to 6 p.m. We have changed our radio repeat to a different station now. We are on a series of Nevada stations. Their main station, KELY 1230 AM radio. The show is on Saturdays at 9 a.m. So forget the jokes about listening to it while you're on your way to church. Well, you could be going to church on Saturday. Yeah, they do that. Anyway, if you go on to their website, KELY 1230 AM radio, it's part of the Nevada Talk Network. It's a network of 7 or 8 stations throughout Nevada. They all play the same show at the same time. And next week we'll have murder defense attorney Clark Patrick on, which I will run this story by him again that we just had the problem with. Please tell your friends that the radio is now on Saturdays at 9 a.m. There's a mistake in the outline there. Thanks for watching and listening to Fired Up. And I've got one other story that I'd like to talk about. Boy, I'm getting good at making these outlines an hour long. This story, I can't get confirmation of. It is a one-source story. The source is a good one. It's KSNV TV News 3 in Las Vegas, our local channel 3. They reported on 9/6 of 2017. This story is still up on their website, but I haven't been able to confirm it with anybody else. A home break-in ended with gunfire in Las Vegas. The homeowner had already been the victim of one home burglary. This was the second one. So this time he was ready for it and armed with a gun. He got a doorbell camera and the gun after 3 people busted down his front door in March of 2016. He said, "I prepared for something, not thinking what was going to happen, and it did happen." This incident took place last month, right at the end of last month, near North Jones in the 215. The moments before the break-in were caught on camera. The resident owns a Ring doorbell, which sends a live feed direct to your cell phone if you rig it that way. It looks like a doorbell, but it's got a camera lens built in. And if somebody tries to break in, it'll come onto your cell phone and you can answer them by talking through the doorbell, which is really cute. The video shows 2 individuals ring the doorbell, apparently to see if anyone is home. The resident was inside. He's watching the crooks from his cell phone. The video from the Ring doorbell shows the intruders talking to each other. Apparently they were confused that it might be an iris reader, and they got their face down right next to it to see, which was nice evidence. They had flashlights, and the resident said, "I'm basically seeing silhouettes of their bodies." A few seconds after they put their eyeballs up against the reader, the crooks reappeared in the backyard, except now, as the guy looked out through his door, there are 4 of them. Now he's got 4 people in his backyard. He pulls out his gun. He explained they had flashlights. "I'm basically seeing silhouettes of their bodies moving around the backyard. As soon as one comes 2 feet into my house, I fired 2 rounds. Then he ran outside and fired 2 more rounds. The intruders fled, and the resident called 911. Officers from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department showed up a few minutes later. Officer Larry Hadfield said the decision to fight back is a personal choice for the homeowner. Calling the police is the best thing you can do. However, if you get down to the point where you're going to be injured or killed, you can defend yourself by any means," the officer said. The resident said he'd never seen the intruders before in his Ring doorbell video. They were coming in, no question, they were coming in, he said. Start with this is clearly, if I've had to paraphrase some of this because this is off the news broadcast on Channel 3 where you've got the commentators kind of talking back and forth. And I cleaned up a few things. This is not exactly the sequence they gave the story in. The sequence was actually pretty confusing. So this is not a word for word, and this, again, is a single source story. It's clearly a valid use of a firearm for self-defense. Technology backed up by a gun defeats criminals one more time. Assuming all of this is as I've concluded, consider the same event if the resident wasn't armed. This is kind of like the lady we were talking about. And the guy discovers he's looking at his cell phone at 4 guys in his backyard trying to break in to his house. And as he said, they were 2 feet in the house when he fired. The police just might have had a video of a whole bunch of murders. Having the video surveillance is a great idea. It may at least show the police who killed you. I guess that's the best way I can put it on this.
That's exactly what it is.
He was prepared. He prepared for the event because it happened before. He had a plan, and he planned to win, and all that's good. And I wish I had more details on this that would make it a little cleaner. There's a lot of information missing on here. But I certainly endorse having cameras in your house, and the one that will show on your cell phone is great. It'll either show the police who killed you, or it'll prevent you from being killed.
We've discussed similar things to this before, and I mean, people, when I teach home defense classes, I ask people, I said, well, here in Nevada, if some guy kicks in your door and he's completely naked, can you shoot him? And I get from, hell yes to.
Who asks you these kind of questions?
Oh, I throw it out to them because I make it the point of, if someone's crazy enough to break in your house, they're crazy enough to hurt you.
Yes.
Now, what I tell my students is if that happens, I would tell them this gentleman one time to get the hell out of my house. And if he continued to aggress in the house, then I may have to use deadly force at that time to defend my life.
But he's obviously unarmed.
Well, yeah, he's unarmed, but he's crazy. That we just don't know. So I this was a good shoot. You got four people against one. That's never good odds.
That's certainly, he is clearly in danger of death at Great Babylon.
Yes.
There is no doubt about it. The facts of the case are pretty clear. And we do recommend cameras. Cameras, people do not tend to break into places with cameras. Make sure your house is secure. Home invasions and burglaries are all over the place. Hopefully we'll see you at the gun show. Buy a book online. Thank you so much for listening. We are up on our 60 minutes. We'll be here next week with Attorney Clark Patrick. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now I got to find my little button here. I'm the engineer.